My name is Kelly Witmer, and it's November 23rd, and I'm making this recording in Joshua Tree, California. I make paintings and sculptures that are abstract, yet based on nature and the human body, as well as the psyche. My sculptures are usually made to hang on a wall, and I make them by melting sheets of glass into a ceramic or steel form in a kiln. So it's unlike glass blowing, just everything happens all closed up, which is frustrating in ways, but also very exciting. It's often what gets me out of bed in the morning. And I get that same element of surprise when I'm painting with watercolor because it's very hard to control. And with both of these things, it's like I'm collaborating with chance, and I think it's what keeps it interesting for me. It's kind of like a controlled surprise. And I've come to realize that I'm just really drawn to the most unforgiving mediums, the ones that are easily breakable and unerasable. When looking at my work, people often ask me if I'm into aliens, and I don't really know how to answer that. I'm pretty much equally agnostic when it comes to God or aliens or ghosts, for that matter. If I had to list an order of possible existence, I would probably, my opinion would be in the order of aliens, ghosts, and then God. I did grow up around a religion, but I think it was so scattered that it kind of left a confused impression on me. I first lived in New Holland, Pennsylvania, which is a small town with a heavy Amish population. But my father's family was Mennonite, which I like to describe as diet Amish. They're not as strict. But they actually left the Mennonite church when my dad was a kid. It's my grandfather had an appliance store, and he sold TVs, even though as Mennonites they weren't allowed to have one. And my dad's older brother was dying from, I think it was muscular dystrophy, so he was bedridden. And so my grandfather snuck home a TV for him to watch. And somebody found out and told the church leaders, who then made my grandfather stand up during church and publicly apologize and swear to get rid of the TV. And apparently on the drive home, he said to my grandmother, "We're keeping it." And somebody told on him again. They told him to apologize again. And so he said, "Nope, we're leaving the church." And they became Episcopalian for whatever reason. But anyway, after New Holland, we moved to Middletown, which was another dinky little town in Pennsylvania. And it became famous a few years later because that's where the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown was. And I was about 8 or 9, and when it happened, it was really strange and scary because the teachers were crying, and the parents were gradually coming to pick up all the kids and evacuating town. But my parents couldn't leave work, so me and the other kids that were left, eventually the school just closed and sent us home. That's how things were back then. So it was really scary. I mean, we were just we didn't know what it was, if it was in the air, if you could breathe it. And since the adults were scared and confused, it was just especially frightening as a child. And I think that maybe that lends a little bit of the sort of apocalyptic or dystopian air of my work that, I don't know, that people have pointed out. But I think there's also a sense of humor in it as well. I don't know why, but anyway. So yeah, after that, we did eventually move to Gettysburg, which is just like another place with a weird history. We rented a house that had been a makeshift hospital during the Civil War, and that was rumored to be haunted. I never saw any ghosts there, but I see how these events kind of shape my fascination for the unknown and history. I went to art school at University of the Arts in Philadelphia, which is also a place with a lot of history. And I gave tours for a while. I drove a horse-drawn carriage. I was a photography major with a big overlap in printmaking. And my work was usually autobiographical. I often used myself as a model and would use layered negatives and experiment with chemicals a lot. And not long after art school, I moved to Los Angeles, just to be somewhere warm, and because the weather's great in LA. So I turned to painting when I didn't have the space for a darkroom, and the majority of my work was figurative for many years, with some abstract work on the side. And gradually I was making more and more abstract work and started to see some commercial success for it, and that kind of gave me the green light to keep going with it. And now I hardly ever make figurative work, and I often miss it, but it's the hardest thing to meld abstract and figurative in a way that works. So that's something I'm still working on. And actually lately I've been kind of dipping back into figurative and making some sort of mask-like sculptures, because I often see faces in my abstract work or bodies, and they kind of seem like characters to me. So I've been just going with it because I'm really interested in the tendency humans have to see faces in everything, or assign meaning to random or ambiguous images. So rather than seeing faces in abstraction, I'm kind of playing with abstracting faces and seeing how far I can go while it's still a face. So my work, as far as unconventional techniques, my work revolves around that. I'm continually learning new processes, and my first inclination is usually just to break the rules or figure out some way to do it differently. I take inspiration from a multitude of sources, archaeological relics from around the world, science fiction, plants, insects, anatomy, and biology books. And I'll sketch from all of these sources as a starting point, and eventually they kind of blend together, I think. I pull inspiration from my paintings for my sculptures and vice versa. And to list all the artists that have influenced me would really take forever, but my biggest heroes are the ones that work in a wide variety of mediums and subject matter, like myself. So like Merritt Oppenheim and Louise Bourgeois, Lee Bontekoe, and Kiki Smith are some big ones for me. I was lucky enough to live near Washington, D.C., in Gettysburg during my teenage years, so I was able to visit all these amazing museums, and they were all free. And I remember I was probably like 13 or something. I saw this retrospective of Jonathan Borofsky's work, and it was just so weird. It really left a mark on me. It opened my eyes that you could just do anything as an artist. As far as my advice to my younger self, besides some warnings not to get involved with a few men in particular, I would advise staying strong in the face of rejection. Because at one point in my life, I was just so beaten down by rejection that I just stopped making art almost completely for years. And now that I look back, I realize that some of those rejections came when I was actually getting my toe in the door, and it's when I gave up when I should have just been pushing harder. So later I felt like I had to play catch up for lost time, but I like to think that things happen for a reason, and that I needed that break for some reason. And I think I learned and grew in other ways, so that I could come back to art. So I think the biggest challenge of being an artist, besides dealing with rejection, is definitely making a living from it, or figuring out how you can make a living and still have the time to make the things you want to make. I often tend to work in silence, I think because there's so much noise in my head. But I recently started sharing a studio space in LA, and I don't really mind all the noises around me. It's kind of a change, because out in the desert, I like just having like wild bird songs as music. When I'm doing repetitive, busy work, I'll listen to podcasts or audiobooks. I like it when people tell me that they really want to touch my work, or some people have said they want to eat it. And that says to me that it's really engaging the senses. And, that's really, I feel like all I can hope for with my work is that it'll make people feel something.